Welcome everybody. My name's Scott Hebbard from Sparx Systems, and this webinar is entitled Enterprise Architect and ArchiMate Motivation Models. So I'd like to welcome everybody and thank you for taking your valuable time to join us today to hear all about ArchiMate and ArchiMate Motivation Models. So the agenda, I'm going to talk about how to submit questions. I'm going to discuss ArchiMate motivation models, and I'm going to hand over to our presenter, Gillian Aidens. And I'm going to then do Q&A at the end with the audience and hear all your questions and pass them on. So Gillian was one of our very first early users of Enterprise Architect way back at version 2. Gillian Aidens is a director at Sparx Services United Kingdom and is the authorized services partner for Sparx Systems for UK and Northern Europe. Gillian studied joint honours mathematics and computer science at Glasgow University as a chartered IT professional member of the British Computer Society. Gillian was one of the very first adopters of UML and Sparx Enterprise Architect in the UK, like I said, from version 2 onwards. She's also considered an expert in BPMN, ArchiMate, and a number of industry standard notations. And Gillian currently provides formal training and consulting services to a wide range of organisations. So after the presentation, feel free to reach out to her if you would like to engage her services in training and consulting and a range of other techniques. So we're very pleased and lucky to have her. The last ArchiMate webinar has been viewed over 1,700 times, so the topic is always very popular. So she has a considerable amount of experience in software project management, analysis and design techniques, and helps her clients. And I'm very pleased to have her join us today. So welcome, and how are you?
Hi Scott, it's Gillian here. Thank you so much for such a lovely introduction. I'm very well, thank you.
My pleasure, and it's always great to have you online with us. So just a few of the logistics. Please note that audio is muted for all participants, but you can type questions to the host. And if we can't answer all questions live, we'll follow up offline. And typically, usually a week after the presentation, we will publish the webinar and the Q&A on the Sparx Systems website. So if you go to sparxsystems.com/webinars, there's hundreds of webinars that are there available for you to view and to review after you've finished watching this one. So this is the go-to question box. Simply enter your text and hit send or hit enter on the numeric keypad, and that'll come through to myself, and we'll get to those questions at the end of the session. But right now, I would like to hand over to Gillian, that's going to present on Enterprise Architect and ArchiMate motivation models. So handing over to you, and I can see Enterprise Architect on screen with the Sparx Services UK logo and the Hippo software logo. So hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Perfect, thank you Scott. And hello to everyone today. I'm delighted to be invited by Sparx Systems to deliver this webinar. The presentation today is going to focus on ArchiMate motivation models within Enterprise Architect. As you're probably all keenly aware, justifying IT projects traditionally entails creating large textual documents. And let's face it, most senior managers probably only read the executive summary. So with Enterprise Architect, we can take a modern graphical approach, expressing the key aspects of a potential project as a diagram that fits neatly onto a single page. To do this, I'm going to use ArchiMate notation. I suspect most of you are already familiar with ArchiMate, but for anyone who is new to this technology, let's initially give just a very brief overview. ArchiMate is an industry standard. It was developed and is maintained by the Open Group. It's a graphical notation for creating enterprise architecture models. The framework consists of 3 core layers: business, application, and technology. And there's a number of extensions with strategy, motivation, physical, and implementation and migration elements. You can see that ArchiMate is very closely aligned with the Open Group's architecture framework, TOGAF. As you can see from the color coding, the ArchiMate notation maps to the TOGAF architecture development method and allows us to create all of the deliverables required at each phase. In today's webinar, we're going to focus exclusively on the motivation elements, which are used in the TOGAF ADM architecture vision phase, where we establish and justify project requirements. So now let's turn our attention to creating a motivation model for our fictional Flower Power organization. Flower Power is an established company that grows and distributes fresh flowers to a variety of retail outlets and chain stores. Like all of us, they had not anticipated just how long the restrictions imposed due to the COVID-19 pandemic would last. Despite being allowed to continue trading, their business has been negatively impacted. Budgets are tight, and architects need to fully justify any new projects. With this in mind, managers have asked their team of architects to put together a project justification that can be shared with company directors and with business stakeholders. So firstly, the Flower Power architects create a library of motivation elements. They create a folder structure to hold all of their reusable architecture artifacts. And within each of these packages, they add a new ArchiMate motivation diagram. The Flower Power architects start by identifying stakeholders relevant to their project. Stakeholders represent any parties that influence an organization's architecture. They can be either internal or external. So some examples of internal stakeholders would include directors, architects, managers, and business departments. And examples of external stakeholders might be shareholders, customers, suppliers, and partners. You'll see that our Flower Power architects have already modelled their internal stakeholders. So they have added a management team stakeholder to represent the team that control flower growing, sales, and distribution at Flower Power. There's also a nursery staff stakeholder. The nursery staff plant, grow, nurture, and harvest the flowers. And the sales team, who are responsible for selling flowers in bulk to their customers. To this, they add an external stakeholder to represent their retail customer. So they use the ArchiMate motivation toolbox to add an additional stakeholder to the diagram. To represent the retail customer. And of course, they can add a more detailed description into the notes window, explaining that Flower Power distributes flowers to a large number of retail outlets and chain stores. All of the notes that they type into the notes window will be incorporated into any justification document that's generated directly from Enterprise Architect. And we'll see that later. So now the Flower Power architects can document drivers associated with each of their stakeholders. The drivers create or motivate change within an organization, and drivers can be internal or external as well. Internal drivers are those that can be controlled by our own company, whereas, of course, external drivers cannot. So examples of internal drivers might include customer satisfaction or profitability. And these internal drivers can be associated with appropriate stakeholders. Examples of external drivers might be economic change or new legislation. And typically, external drivers will influence our internal drivers. Our Flower Power architects have already identified profitability as an internal driver, and they've associated that with the management team, nursery staff, and sales team stakeholders. Profitability is always an essential driver for every company, but it's now very much in the limelight with the impact of COVID-19 on Flower Power. The architects have also modelled weather as an external driver, which influences their profitability. They recognise that weather has a significant impact on flower growing, and although not under their direct control, weather predictions can help with planning and forecasting. They now drag their retail customer stakeholder onto the diagram and paste it as a link, so they're reusing the stakeholder, and they add a new driver into their model for sales management. Again, they can provide a detailed description in the notes window explaining that high quality sales management is essential for the sales team to achieve targets and to maintain credibility with their customers. They now add association relationships from the sales team and also from the retail customer to their sales management driver. Most of the relationships in the motivation model of ArchiMate are associations. So they're simple, solid lines connecting the elements together and are therefore easily understood by any audience. With drivers in place, our Flower Power architects can carry out assessments against each of these drivers. Assessments document the outcome of our analysis of a driver. And again, there can be both internal and external factors to consider. So internally, we can identify strengths to build upon or weaknesses that we might need to address. And externally, we can spot opportunities to benefit from or threats that we might need to guard against. Our Flower Power architects have already identified poor trend analysis and a high level of waste due to unsold flowers as assessments against their profitability driver. In terms of current trend analysis, the planning, ordering and planting of flowers is left solely to the discretion of individual nursery managers. And as a result, there's now a high level of waste, with unsold flowers frequently being added to the compost bin. They now drag and drop the sales management driver onto the assessment diagram, again as a link, reusing that element, and they add an assessment to say that orders taken that cannot be fulfilled. And again, adding a detailed description into the notes, just explaining that in the last 6 months in particular, there's been a substantial increase in the number of sales taken that cannot be fulfilled within a reasonable timescale, and that this is leading to significant customer dissatisfaction. They add an association relationship from their new driver to the assessment. Now, even with just this very small amount of information in the model, the traceability window becomes a really useful tool. We can open this from the Start ribbon using the Design button and selecting to open the traceability window. And if, for example, I select the profitability driver, we see that the traceability window reveals lots of useful information. It tells us that that driver is associated with various stakeholders, that it's been tied to a couple of our assessments, and that it's influenced by an external driver. The Flower Power architects can now set some goals based on their assessments. Goals represent the end state that our stakeholders desire. Each goal is typically associated with an assessment. The goals should be expressed using explicit qualitative and quantitative terminology. So, for example, what degree of improvement do we wish to make, and within which timescale? These should be very measurable goals that can be tested. The Flower Power architects have set some goals to introduce scientific forecasting within 6 months and to reduce the flower waste by 50% within the next 12 months. And those goals have been associated with the appropriate assessments. They now drag and drop their new assessment that orders cannot be fulfilled onto the goals diagram, and they add a new goal to provide accurate flower availability in real time. Adding a description to the notes window. They recognise that it's essential to provide real-time information to the sales team to ensure that they only sell flowers that are currently available. And they need a solution for this within the next 4 months. They add an association relationship from their assessment to their new goal. Now, the identification of goals will lead to an exploration of requirements, principles, and constraints. So we'll start with requirements. Requirements provide a statement of need or desire, and a goal is realized or implemented by one or more requirements. Requirements imply new or modified system elements. So it could be a change to a business role. It could be that we need to create a new business process, or that we need to update an existing business process. It could be that we develop a new application, or that we update an existing application. Requirements will typically initiate a project or a work package. So our Flower Power architects have identified some requirements. They're going to research and automate forecasting, and they want to come up with a marketing campaign to target the surplus flowers. And on this occasion, they've created a realize relationship back to the goal, indicating that this requirement will implement their goal. They now drag and drop their new goal to provide the accurate flower availability onto the requirements diagram, and they add a new requirement. They're going to hopefully develop an app to report flower availability. And again, they add some appropriate documentation into the notes window, explaining that they wish to have an app that's useful from any portable device, a smartphone, tablet, or laptop. And they add a realize relationship from their requirement to the goal. So next, they turn their attention to considering if there are any principles that need to be taken into account. A principle defines a general standard or common practice across a business sector or an industry domain. So principles will help us to realise our goals, and of course they should be considered alongside requirements. The Flower Power architects have already stated one principle, that they wish to use industry standard forecasting techniques, and they've created a realised relationship to the appropriate goal. They now drag their new goal of providing real-time flower availability onto the principles diagram, and they create a new principle. They want to adhere to industry standards for app development. They pop a little description into the notes window, and they create a realised relationship from their principle to their goal. And finally, our architects consider constraints. Now, constraints define a restriction. They influence how the solution can be implemented. And quite often that will reflect some time or budget or technology limitation. So constraints also need to be considered alongside our requirements. Our Flower Power architects have documented a time constraint that their new marketing solution has to be implemented within 6 months, and that's been associated with the respective goal. They drag and drop their new goal onto the constraints diagram, and they add a constraint, and this time it's a budget constraint. Our new app is to be funded from this year's IT budget. Whoops. And in good practice, they add a little description into the notes and then create a realized relationship from the constraint to their goal. So now we have all the ingredients to create a project justification on a single page. So our architects can copy and paste all the motivation elements from the various motivation diagrams onto a single diagram, or they can, of course, drag and drop those elements from the library packages. And as they do so, all of the relationships that exist are automatically added onto their project justification diagram. So they drag and drop the retail customer stakeholder as a link onto the diagram. They drag and drop their new sales management driver, and you'll see the associations automatically appear. They drag and drop their issue with orders not being fulfilled, their assessment onto the diagram. They drag and drop their goal to provide accurate flower availability information. They drag and drop their new requirement to develop an app. They drag and drop their principle to adhere to industry standards and just add a little bend with a control click into the line just to make that a little bit prettier. And of course they drag and drop the constraint, the budget constraint, that the app needs to be within this year's IT budget, and again a little control click to add a bend into the line. So they have this beautiful summary diagram explaining the justification for the projects that they would like to kick off. Of course, our architects can understand this diagram because they are already familiar with ArchiMate notation. However, we need to be able to share this information with a wide range of directors and business stakeholders who have not been trained in ArchiMate. So to make this diagram much easier to understand and more intuitive, the architects add a legend to the diagram, and they use the auto color feature in Enterprise Architect to filter the elements, and they can filter those based on any element property or a tagged value custom property. In our case, we are filtering based on the stereotype of the element itself. So we type in each of the different ArchiMate stereotypes in turn and associate that with a different color. So we're going to show our stakeholders in red, our drivers in orange, our assessments are going to be in yellow, goals in green, requirements in blue, principles in purple, and constraints in pink, using all the colours of the rainbow. And the really nice feature in newer versions of Enterprise Architect is we can have a separate display value associated with each of the elements in our diagram legend. And this means if your organisation uses a slightly different terminology to the ArchiMate terminology, then you can do a mapping exercise and you can use your own terminology on the legend. So now we have a nice, pretty looking diagram that everyone in our organisation can understand. We've got on the left-hand side our stakeholders in red, and they're associated with drivers in orange. We've then got the assessments that we've carried out in yellow. We've associated those with some goals that we have for our organisation, and those are then related to a set of requirements that we would like to undertake. And we've also identified in purple the principles, and in pink the constraints that need to be taken into account as well. Of course, the traditional way of sharing this information with our stakeholders is to produce a nice lengthy textual document. And Enterprise Architect will happily allow you to do this. We can simply select our motivation view in the browser, go to the Publish ribbon, and use our report builder to construct a document for us. I have already created a custom template that will pull out the diagrams and the information in a suitable format, and I've added my own cover page to this. So with the click of a button, I can generate a document that will share all of the information within my model. I'll just drag that document over here and you can see the result. A nice front page for our motivation model, table of contents, and then we have our summary justification diagram, followed by detailed information on our stakeholders, our drivers, all of our assessments, the goals that we've set, requirements that we've identified, principles, and of course constraints. Wow, a 10-page document from a simple diagram. And of course, if anything changes in the model, we can make those updates, and again, at the click of a button, we can regenerate that document so our stakeholders can receive accurate and up-to-date information from the model at any time. Of course, this is a rather old-fashioned approach to communication. We have an alternative these days which allows us to use the power of ProCloud Server and Prolaborate to share our model using a Prolaborate dashboard. I'm just going to drag my Prolaborate dashboard across and share it with you. You can see here that we have a number of diagrams and graphics that we're sharing through Prolaborate. The beauty of this is that our stakeholders can access this information from any browser. So they don't have to understand ArchiMate. We have color coding and a legend to explain the notation. They don't have to have been trained in using Enterprise Architect. They don't have to have EA installed on their PCs, but we can, through a browser, share all of the information that we've created within our model with them. So we can share diagrams, for example, our summary project justification on a single page. They can go in and look at that diagram. They can click on any of the elements within the diagram and see all of the documentation appear in a nice clean format in a browser on the right hand side, just clicking on the elements and they see the associated documentation. They can also have a look at the usage of these elements and see any other diagrams that that particular element appears on, and they can easily switch to another diagram. They can also have a look at the traceability window, and they'll be able to see all the connected elements within the model, anything that's associated with their selected element. And they can start or contribute to a discussion on the model as well. So they could add their own thoughts. I think this is the highest priority driver for the next 12 months. And you'll see it immediately updates our diagram to show that a discussion exists. Others can go and look at your comments and contribute their own thoughts. The other nice thing about Prolaborate is that we can create some nice looking graphs and charts. So we've created a little motivation bar chart here, and I guess one of my favorite charts is the nested pie chart. So we can encourage people to interact with the model as well. This pie chart is showing all of the stakeholders in the middle here and their associated drivers, assessments, goals, and requirements. And we can focus in, say, on the sales team and look at the drivers and assessments relevant to them, maybe focus in on the profitability assessment and see what our goals are, what our requirements are, and what constraints we need to live within. And we can pop back out and take a look at one of our other stakeholders, maybe the nursery staff, and again, we can interact with that. So it's a really nice, clean, simple environment available through a browser, but it does encourage the stakeholders to get involved in our project and to communicate with us and provide their feedback. So that pretty much brings me to the end of the presentation. I'm hoping that that gave you an insight into how you can use the ArchiMate motivation model within Enterprise Architect and then share that information with your stakeholders using ProCloud Server and Prolaborate. Just a little pitch at the end for Sparx Services UK. We are based in Scotland. We're all working from home under the current circumstances. We have lots of experience of delivering EA training courses and also consulting by webinar. And we're running a whole series of public webinar courses every month. We've got some lined up for November. We'll also have a free EA overview course on the 3rd of November in the afternoon, and a few of our courses in November are running across 2 afternoons to allow people in different time zones to attend those as well. So yeah, please do get in touch if we can be of any assistance, either for training or if you need specific assistance on your own projects. We can do EA consulting and mentoring by webinar as well. So I'll hand back now to Scott, and I'm very happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. That was a great presentation, seeing how Enterprise Architect can be used to model those motivation elements and then making it available instantly in Prolaborate. And so I suppose the very first question is, what are some of the advantages of using a ProCloud Server and Prolaborate approach over a traditional documentation approach?
Well, I guess the primary advantage is that your stakeholders are able to access a live, up-to-date model whenever they go through Prolaborate and look at the diagrams and models that have been created in Enterprise Architect. They're seeing the most up-to-date information, and if architects wish, they can actually permit stakeholders to edit some of that information through Prolaborate as well. So you have the option to choose what information is shared, make it clean, only share those properties that are of interest to your audience. And you can choose to make that read-only if that's appropriate, or you can choose to make some of the properties editable as well. And that would allow a whole wide range of business stakeholders to get involved and actually start perhaps to contribute to the model, to populate the model with information. And if not, if they're just reviewing the model, they can have discussions and they can provide feedback to you. It just makes it a lot more of a collaborative effort. But also, I guess the key difference is if you generate a document, it's true at the point of generation, but then things will change over time and the document becomes out of date. Whereas the Prolaborate dashboard's dynamic and completely up to date and gives you the current information that's available. So I think that's its big strength. And of course, you can use Prolaborate to organise and invite stakeholders to formal reviews as well and have them review the model formally and sign it off that way.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point that the minute you hit print on a report, it's out of date the minute it's printed, where at least you're looking at information live in the repository and it's there and available. So I've got a few questions here. I've got a question from Michael, and he's talking about the color coding and can you have color coding when editing in the tool? So I know you had a little legend there, but you can change some of the colors of the elements in ArchiMate as well.
Yes, you can. A legend's quite a nice way of overlaying colours onto an existing diagram. So by default, ArchiMate has different colours assigned to the different layers. So if you're working in the business layer, you have yellow elements, and then if you move down into the application and technology layer, you get kind of blue and then green elements. And of course, the motivation elements by default are purple in nature. Obviously, Enterprise Architect's got lots of features to permit you to very easily change colours just from the layout ribbon. You can come up and use these features and you can kind of set any colours you like on elements, but that's rather a manual approach, I guess. So the thing I like about the diagram legend is that you could put different legends onto the same diagram and color code for different purposes. So with this legend, we're very much focusing on explaining the notation, I guess, to maybe stakeholders that don't understand that notation. But we use legends for all sorts of purposes. So we could have a legend that highlights the cost of projects or the cost of requirements, or highlights the amount of effort involved, and you know, just automatically color the elements in for different purposes. You've
I've
possibly
seen
got other
examples
thoughts
where,
in mind?
yeah, I've seen examples where, you know, any item on the page that costs over 10,000 and that's as a separate tagged value is highlighted in red, for example. And I've also
Yes.
seen people with multiple legends that not only color the elements, but also the connectors as well. So that's probably important to note as well.
Yes, you can do that as well. And you can have multiple legends update a single element. If one legend maybe updates the background color, another legend could update the outline size and color as well. So lots of useful features there.
There's a question here from Michael, which I might just field. It says, would it be possible to integrate Sparx EA with Confluence in a similar way as Prolaborate? And because the ProCloud server allows integration, we do have a number of customers that are integrating with Confluence as well. So yes, that is possible. So the next question, it talks about, can you auto-populate the diagram as a starting point to create the summary diagram? I'm not certain.
Yeah, I guess indeed you can. You can drag, say, the driver onto your diagram, and then just right-click and use Insert Related Elements, and that will initially show you all directly related elements. So we're seeing the stakeholders and the assessments appear here, and just tick all, and then click OK, and it will automatically populate all the connected elements. And you can actually go more than one level away. You can go up to 5 levels away, and that will bring indirectly connected elements onto the diagram as well. Just be a little bit wary. Down in the bottom left-hand corner is a little checkbox that sometimes catches people out. It does an automatic diagram layout for you. So if you've spent time making your diagram look pretty, you might want to deselect that first and then just manually lay out the elements. But if it's a brand new diagram, you can allow EA to do the layout for you. So that would certainly allow you to populate this diagram very quickly with all of this information.
Yeah, and I use that feature all the time, and I think using that in combination with some of the templates that exist in the toolbox can make it really easy to get up and running if you're new to Enterprise Architect and Sparx systems. So that certainly helps a lot as well. I've got a question here from Patrick. So hopefully I get through this okay. It says ArchiMate supports elements to links. For example, the assessment or trend analysis is associated with the goal introduce scientific forecasting. Let name that association A, and it says how to create a resource element that's associated with association A. So could you perhaps talk about how resources work in Enterprise Architect?
So I guess there's a couple of different options here, in that you have on your ArchiMate toolkit, you have resource elements there, which allow you to kind of model resources within your organization. So it could be sort of staff or I guess IT knowledge or equipment that could be modeled. So you could use that element to add that type of information into the model as well. But Scott, are you thinking more in terms of allocating resources to carry out project work, that sort of thing?
I was going to say that yes, you can use the resource element, but you can also assign resources to an element within Enterprise Architect. And I think when
Indeed.
we publish it, we can provide a link to an entire webinar that talks about resource allocation in a bit more detail.
Yeah,
I've got a
because
question.
obviously, Yeah, I was just going to say these requirements could ultimately become work packages or projects, and of course you might then want to allocate resources to those and see those maybe in a Gantt chart, and that's all possible within Enterprise Architect as well.
Yeah, I think it's a great point that Enterprise Architect does have a lot of features around project management and around collaboration and around model mail and around chat. So a lot of that management, and of course with support for Gantt charts, it makes it very easy to assign resources and to manage those projects beyond this stage. So thank you very much. So I might do one last question before I wrap things up. And Tracy has a question saying, is there any training on creating templates that can be used by all team members? So if someone wanted some training about templates and getting up and running, how might you be able to assist them?
Well, it depends what types of templates you're after, but the answer in general is yes. So we have training courses on how to create document templates, for example. We do a one-day document workshop that shows you how to create a template such that you can generate documentation in the format you would like to. There's also the possibility of creating your own kind of profile for using EA, where you define your own diagram types and your own toolboxes, and maybe you cut down on the standard ArchiMate toolbox and just have your modelers focus in on a smaller subset of these elements. And all of that can be done using an MDG technology and setting up your own profile. So again, we have a workshop that teaches people how to do that, or we can assist them through consulting to do that type of thing. So I guess it depends what type of template you're after.
And I think they're more than welcome to reach out and contact you to discuss that in more detail. So thanks very much for that. That's fantastic. So I might just wrap up now, and
I'll just put our contact details back on screen.
No problems. I will let you show that so that if people want to get in touch, they can do so. So yes, hippo@hipposoftware.co.uk, and that would be great. So just to wrap up, there are a number of webinars on Enterprise Architect 15.2, our new EA for BA webinar series. They're all available on the Sparx Systems YouTube site and also on sparxsystems.com/webinars. They're all free, so we encourage you to access them and download them today. And I'd like to thank Gillian for her time tonight. It's great to have the nice contrasting accents, a nice Aussie accent and a that sounds much more classy, beautiful Scottish accent on the other end. Lovely to have you join us and to share your expertise. If anyone has any questions or if they have any suggestions for future webinars, please email us at webinar@sparxsystems.com. You can get a free 30-day trial of Enterprise Architect 15, and you can download that today if you want to have a look at some of the things that we've seen today here around the ArchiMate motivation models. So thanks, Gillian, and thank you very much for your time. And I think every time I see one of your webinars, I learn something more about ArchiMate, and you make it look so easy. And so thank you very much for your time and for your expertise tonight.
Thank you, Scott. It was great to be here.
Lovely. And thanks. Look after one another, and look forward to seeing you at a future webinar. So thanks for joining us, and take care, and see you again soon. Goodbye.